Or knots. It's got a nice ring to it. I like that one, Scott. Welcome to a conversation with. Today we have an amazingly talented guest who works at Ubisoft currently. I believe she's worked there since close to, no, don't quote me on this, close to the beginning of time. I think she's been there for a really long time. I know she worked on Pinocchio 3000 before that. This is only because I spied on her a little bit on LinkedIn, but I've always known Stephanie as someone who works at Ubisoft because that's where I met her. She, like many here, started in animation and sort of, like so many people we have on the show, they start with animation or something else even, and then ended up in animation. But just by a series of events and, forks in the road, she found herself doing something that's obviously very related to animation and still leans into animation, but is a bit more specific. She does what's called realization direction and around these parts, but I think otherwise you could probably call that cinematic direction. She's the one who's focused on directing the cutscenes and a lot of these sort of the more narrative aspects of a game. I'll let her explain that a little bit more because I think it's a really interesting topic. But before I do that, let's bring in David. David.
Hello, Brent.
Did you not work on Pinocchio 3000 as well?
I did work on Pinocchio 3000
did you,
as well.
Did you know
those were the
Stephanie
days
back
in
then?
Montreal that there was like 12 projects.
Yeah.
so I was, you're on that project.
Yeah, that's
actually,
it.
Funny story. Steph and I went to the same school, Interdec here in Montreal, but I graduated 1 year before, so she literally started right as I left. So we met each other on Pinocchio 3000 at a time that we were all very much figuring out how this CG thing was working, and we had to create an animated feature at the same time.
Perfect.
Those were, early 2000.
The good old days.
And that's when, after that, as you said, Steph went on to go on the dark side of video game and pretty much stayed. So I have a few questions.
They just grabbed her and they didn't let her go. It's funny. Pinocchio 3000 doesn't even sound right because around these parts where it was made, it's Pinocchio 3000, and it's like it feels weird even saying it out loud, even though I'm English. But anyways, that's interesting that you had you've known each other for very, very you met a long time ago because Pinocchio 3000. What was that year? Was that 2004?
That was 2002, 2003.
Okay.
So
wow.
that would mean that Steph has probably been at Ubisoft for 17 years now. Roughly.
Yes, but I know that women don't like talking about age or having an indication of time. So don't worry. Stephanie is 100% ageless. She hasn't aged a day since that time. So this whole conversation of time frames doesn't really matter. So disregard all that. Let's bring her in and then she can defend herself. Stephanie Desforges, how are you?
He's right. 17 years.
It's crazy. You blink and it's gone. It's just nuts. Much has changed.
Actually, it's almost 18. In March, it's going to be 18 years.
That's crazy. How many crew gift have you received over time for? Hey, 2 years. Hey, 5 years.
I have a lot
10
of
years.
Game hoodies.
That's the swag shelf back there.
Backpack and hoodies.
Did you like? Was it when you went to Ubisoft? Did you stay? Like, have you didn't go away for a while and then come back? Have you been at Ubisoft ever since you started there back in like 2004-ish, 5-ish?
I got lucky. I've had lots of different opportunities. I started. At first, they hired me to do lip sync, which is what I did on Pinocchio. I was even doing like the facial shapes, doing some modeling to create the facial setups. And our producer there was my teacher at Interdeck, and he goes like, Steph was pretty good at animating. Maybe we could give her a chance. I was like, yes, please. And they gave me the chance to animate at the cinematic studio. Do you want to hear a funny story?
I love funny stories.
Let's go for it.
Since like I hadn't animated on a big production besides doing lip sync. And lip sync, you just put the phonemes where they should be and things like that. And we weren't even doing the facial. We were sending that off to the animation teams, like David was animating the facial, the expressions. So I hadn't worked that much on some production. And then I got the chance to animate some of the cutscenes on Prince of Persia. And our team lead at the point wasn't too sure. He had these 2 new animators that wanted to try and like, okay, but it's a really crunch. It was Omar Morsi, and I really love him, and he knows this story now, so it's not news to him.
We need to get him on the show, by the way. He's eluded the show for far too long, so we got to get him on here.
Yep.
And like he said, okay, girls, I trust you. If you tell me you can do this, like come up with a plan. Show me all your stuff. I'm like, oh yeah, we think we can do all these shots. This is what we want to go do with them. He goes, okay. I trust you. Like I really felt like he trusted us. It's nice to have that, junior confidence when you're 20. You feel you can take on the world. I was like, yeah, sure, I can do this. And so he goes, I'll go. I want to see your blocking next week. Like, So he went away. And I turned to Audrey. I said, so exactly what is blocking?
What did I just agree to do in a week?
What's it like? And I realized that at Interdeck, they never showed me anything like blocking or things like that.
They didn't show us animation. They show us the software. That's what we
exactly.
learned.
They showed us how to. It was more like a 3D graphics, I'd say, class. Which a few years afterwards, working at Ubisoft, I said, like, I want to learn more about animation. I'm tired of just trying to learn on top of everything while I'm trying to get my shots out. So I did Animation Mentor, and it opened a whole new world to me. I was like, oh, that's why I keep getting that comment, and that's why everything starts from the hips, and I have to redo my shot completely when my hips are wrong. It helped so much.
It's funny because I went through the same thing. My first job getting out of Internet and having no idea. I mean, I know how to work with a keyframe and how to adjust key curves and all that. But by default, you just start animating straight ahead. And you take a couple of days to do your entire animation. You show it for the first time, like, yeah, that's really bad. And then you're like, oh no, oh God, what do I do now? How can I even fix this? So I can totally relate to this. And then you discover blocking or even step blocking and all that. You're like, oh yeah, that makes a lot more sense to do it this way. I'm sorry, Brent. I'm curious the journey, because from starting from animation to where you are today, was that a series of happy accident, or there was rapidly a master plan to go towards where you're at today?
No master plan. Of course, like when I started with Pinocchio, I was like, okay, I'm making a feature film, next stop Pixar. That didn't happen. So after Pinocchio, I was like, you know what? I really like the technical aspect. So maybe games might be interesting. Right now, I still think sometimes I would have liked to do gameplay animation because of the whole systemic part of it. Like it's a puzzle, trying to find all the animations you need. Like they have a lot of admiration from my part. And I love the logics behind it. But I was closer to cinematic, so I went to the cinematic studio. For a good period, at some point, they stopped making pre-rendered cinematics at Ubisoft for a certain period of time. So I had to rethink my future. I had actually even bought my first condo at the same time, and I was out of the notary and got this saying like, okay, they're closing the studio. I was like, this is great. But they placed it, and there was an opportunity to work on Assassins 3 at the time, and they were trying to start the in-game cinematics were getting a whole lot more high res at the moment. So this is where my knowledge of facial animation was a little niche, and that's how I made my way there. They had double the amount of bones on the face, and people weren't used to work with that many bones in gameplay. So that's how I made my way to the brand, and I stayed there. I've been, I think, on almost every Assassin since AC3. And it's
she goes Assassins, you don't go back. That's what they say. So many people, like a lot of people, have been on that brand for a very, very long time because it's like it's an interesting brand,
fun.
and
it changes a setting every time you learn about history. So I like it, and it's during that that project that our animation director, who was directing the cinematic, said, "Okay, Steph, you're taking one chapter of the game." Was like, "You want me to animate all the cinematics in that chapter?" He goes, "No, I want you to go to the mocap studio and you direct the actors."
And you're like,
I was like, think about it. It was Dave Wilkinson. He said, "Think about it, and you tell me what you want to do." I was like, and then I went to see him, and like, it's the kind of opportunity. If I say no now, I'm gonna regret it, right? Like, it doesn't come along that many times, so yeah, I'm gonna do it. And I had a lot of fun. It was so much fun to work with the actors, think of a whole chapter. It was the chapter where everything goes wrong for Connor. Like, you realize your dad's a traitor. You realize that even Washington traded, kind of used you. And he even goes back to his village. It's burning. And the actor was very... it was like how he said that's how Native Americans they keep their cool all the time. But I was like, okay, for this shot, all hell broke loose for you. So could we just crank up a bit the emotion? So I was super happy for once you could see like Connor feeling completely desperate. Unfortunately, all the scenes that were in Mohawk Village were translated in Mohawk. So we completely lost that cool performance from Noah. So I was like, no. So that was fun. So that was my first taste of directing, and I really enjoyed it.
And Steph, I'm just curious, why do you think that they asked you specifically? Did you already had showed some interest? Did you already help on another shoot? How did it come about? Because it's not any animator that will be given the opportunity to direct actors, because there are some... I mean, it's good to have some technical knowledge about animation in general, because that's okay. You know what kind of data you need to bring in the cinematic, but directing actor is almost like a complete different skill that you have to develop in animation.
It's true that before that, I was maybe a bit very opinionated, I'd say.
It's not the first time we've heard this on this show.
No, exactly.
And,
people get often promoted into those roles when they have opinions. Apparently, it's a trend. Sorry, Steph.
But I also noted, like, it was my first turn at joining a cinematic team for gameplay, and I felt that the cinematic director had too much on their shoulders. They had to go to the script process. They had to know what was going on in gameplay, how the scene works with the quest that you might have before. And while I was working, I was getting scenes, and our director sometimes wasn't there. So I go see the designers and say, like, okay, I got this mocap. So what happens in your quest exactly? And then they would look at the mocap and go like, but that's not what we asked for. That's not what we thought we needed. So I realized there was like the telephone game kind of thing happening between what the quest designers asked for, what the directors came up during script block, and then what would be shot at the mocap. Plus, often I had mocap where somebody would turn right, walk into a wall while the door was actually on the left, type of thing. Yeah. So I said, you know what? How about I go to the mocap studio with you? I'll export the sets. We didn't do that back then. Usually we just had a small mocap studio and we're just happy to have mocap. I was like, we have the technology now. We can like put markers on where the freaking doors are and have the right distance. I had a scene that was in a prison cell that was like this big, and they shot the whole mocap on the whole floor on the studio, the mocap floor. So I had to like chop my scene. And back then we didn't have non-linear editing. So as soon as you would cut your mocap, it's gone. So I was like, okay, I hope you like your cameras here, because once I cut it, it's gone. I'm not doing this again. Again, very opinionated and stood my ground. And I was like, okay, she likes results. I guess once I went to the mocap studio, he appreciated the help, and sometimes I would tell him maybe that would help if the wall, we could do this and that. And he said, you know what? Just do one chapter.
Go do it.
Thank you, David. Thank you. I owe him a lot for this opportunity.
It's funny because my introduction to directing actors is exactly the same. I was in a production, more in charge of the cinematic, but they were hiring a very experienced Hollywood director to direct actors, and the performance was fine, but the blocking was a mess, like exactly as you described. And I think it's on the second or third shoot, say, would you mind just go and see what's going on? And then when I got there, I was like, okay, but poor director, he has no idea. Yes, he's receiving like the day before an image of the set and the line. He's going to focus on performance. But, actors have so many questions during the shoot. Oh, what about this door? Is it on this side or this side? How much space do I? And they... and you have a certain amount of hours. So they were just, well, we're going to improvise, and, they will figure it out. And that's the part when you realize that, no, the they will figure it out part is going to be very long, very frustrating, and very expensive. So let's have someone from this team of...
Yeah, exactly.
Or on set.
Yeah. Someone who would be doing the figuring out so they can actually avoid the work that they would have to clean up later, right? Yeah, that's key.
Exactly. So when you started, Stephanie, were you alone, or you were kind of assistant director, or did you have someone to assist you? How did those first experience? Because it can be pretty stressful at first when you're starting.
I was assistant director for a bunch of ACs. Like even for AC3, when he said you have that chapter, he was still at the mocap studio with me. He said, I'll be there if something goes wrong. But afterwards, I assisted the directors, Sylvain Bernard on Unity, Ramiro Bélanger on Syndicate, Félix Etienne Roch on Origins. And then when we went to the Hidden Ones expansion, I got to be director on the expansion. It was really fun. we had very little time, and it was like, okay, we want to make sure we have something that has quality, but expansions don't have the same budget as big games, and they don't have the same time as big games. So we try to be as efficient as possible and try to find the right balance for quality and the amount of content. So that was really fun. So plus, also the actors already know their roles, since they did all that the helps. Games. So I was like, what do you think for this scene? So that was fun.
And just quick question, because in your title right now it says cinematic design director. Can you just clarify how this compared to just cinematic director, or is this just another name to describe the same thing?
Because my title actually changed once I went to Valhalla. Because after Origins, Odyssey, the Quebec studio, came up with the dialogue editor, which is a sequencer to create interactive cinematics, like you have in The Witcher or the Mass Effect games. And like for a long time, once I joined AC3 and started working with Motion Builder and saw sequencers, I'm like, we have so many cutscenes that are just two people standing and talking, giving information. Oh, you have to go get that many chickens. Why do we go to mocap for that? That's very expensive chickens. So I was like, we should be able to reuse some animation and things like that. And while we were working on Origins, I was seeing the progress done on Odyssey. I was like, oh, this is so cool. This is so cool. Like, there's so many things we could do with that. Of course, we may not reach for now the cinematic quality of fully mocap scenes, but the amount of content we can do. So this is the mandate I took once I was over to Valhalla. I was like, okay, give me the scene design, the dialogue editor. I'm going to push the quality on this. I had so many ideas of what we could do with it. We made 17 hours of cutscenes.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
The dialogue editor. And that, I'm not counting the stuff that's auto-generated, that's completely systemic. But the 17 hours we did over with a bunch of people in Sofia, in Singapore, Montreal, Quebec even helped. And they all handcrafted, most of them. Nothing in there was auto-generated. Auto-generated, people were like picking the right gesture, placing it at the right timing, putting a blink at the right time, turning the
17 hours is ridiculous.
That's insane.
That is like games. There are games out there that don't last anywhere close to that. Games, entire content, and this is just the freaking these gameplay based moments. Like, it's crazy. It's interesting. Quick shout out to anybody who knows or might even have worked or currently works with the Witcher team, because honestly, it still remains a reference to this day as far as how to remove the talking head effect that Stephanie was talking about and try to give it a bit more of a performance, an actual narrative moment. And if you take a good look at Witcher, you'll see that there's a formula to it. It's not rocket science. It just requires a will to sort of build a pipeline that can sort of manufacture these things in an efficient way. But they are really well done, and they really did. I think there was a huge milestone there because it really shifted the way these kind of moments in games are portrayed, and it segues into an interesting topic. You touched on earlier this the fact that you worked for at the beginning, you worked for the sort of, I don't know what you called it. It was like the cinematic department, and it changed names a few times. Ubisoft was known, and it was kind of a radical idea at the time. Their own their own individual department, kind of like almost like their own studio. What was it called at the beginning? What was the first name of this? I can't remember.
The Cinematic Studio.
Oh, okay, but it went through a couple different names, right?
It switched to UDA.
UDA, that's
Ubisoft,
the one I remember. Digital Arts, I think, wasn't it?
Digital Arts,
Digital Animation? Yeah.
Which is the same as Union des Artistes in Quebec, so it was super confusing.
Yeah.
But afterwards,
awesome.
Once they stopped doing pre-rendered stuff, or they changed mandate, I think it was Ubix for a while. Now
that's right.
They're called Helix.
Oh, wow. Okay. Another brand. They but they shut down sometimes, and then they rebrand and relaunched. It was really like its own company inside of Ubisoft. And I remember when I was there, they were down on like the bottom floor. They were like in the basement. They were like the dungeon dwellers. And the reason why I wanted to bring that up is because you hinted at the idea that that day that you got that notice, you just put an offer on a condo, and you're like, oh, great timing. They're shutting my department down. A lot of that, now my experience at Ubisoft, and I'm curious what your opinion is on this in general, and it doesn't have to be a Ubisoft thing. I think this was a very industry-wide thing. The waxing and waning of favor when it comes to narrative moments in a game. Because I remember back in the day, there was suddenly at that time when they were trying to shift away from pre-rendered, there was a bunch of reasons for it. And one of the reasons was, of course, that it felt like there was a rift in the sort of its connection with the game, and there was a bunch of other things. I feel like Witcher is a good example of a game that would come out and show that it can be done, and you can have these nice narrative moments, and it doesn't feel like a sidebar to the experience. Like, how do you feel about all this? Like this, like narrative in games, like what's the best way to go, and like just sort of trying to have what's your perspective on the fact that the wind seems to always blow in different directions on that opinion? I know it's a big topic. Yeah.
It changes with time. I've seen both. Like at Ubisoft, we're like, okay, we don't want to have any cinematics anymore. We want systemic. We don't want to see any more of that. And then you're like, okay, well, here's your cinematic budget, and then they make the game, and then they go like, we have like
exactly
5 more minutes, or maybe just 5 more minutes, or like for a game that had cinematics fully rendered, like the last one was Origin, only fully mocap cinematic. I think we did 3 hours 15 minutes, something like that. That was huge.
At the time, that would have been big.
And a big scene used to be like 2 minutes. That's a huge scene when you have a 2-minute scene for not pre-rendered, but fully mocap. And I was in some script blocks for Valhalla, and sometimes I had a sim design scene that was about 10 minutes. And I was like raising my hands. Like, you guys remember when 2 minutes was a long scene, right? So I think we could maybe make that one a bit shorter. It might be more interesting. So it really depends also on the tools that you have. So I'm guessing they felt that mocap was expensive, so we need to shorten our cinematics. Okay, we have a magic button that's called Sim Design. They know it's not magic anymore. But so now the scope of narration kind of exploded.
Right. Yeah. Because it's no longer so cost prohibitive as far as they're concerned. Interesting. Because I feel like this, because the way you described your role now as like, what was the title again? The official one?
Cinematic design director.
Director. Okay. It feels like it's obviously like that kind of narrative in the game is woven a bit more into the gameplay itself. Like some of them are brief moments of dialogue, and sometimes it's not like the classic old school. We cut away like, and when I say classic old school, I'm thinking Final Fantasy, where like they would be like literally you would cut to this epic like pre-rendered animation. Like that's the classic style of narrative or cutscenes in games. The cutscenes in games now, it's not really a thing in a way. It's like there's different ingredients of narrative, and it seems like you're dealing with a very specific type of narrative in the game.
We had some rules where we thought that sim design, we could bring the scenes up to a certain level of quality, but sometimes we felt like, okay, this might be better off as a full cinematic with mocap.
Right.
Anything that was extremely emotional, everything that had a lot of action in it.
Right.
But at first, it was really to get all these scenes where please go get 3 sheep. They stole my sheep, or things like that.
The classic sheep quest, yes.
Yes. And then we realized we could take on more and more. Even at the beginning, I was like, you know what? This scene, I think we can do it in sim design. And directors weren't too sure, like, no, we're going to give it to cinematics. I'm like, you're busting through your cinematic budget really fast right now. But and afterwards, a creative director came and see me like, you know what? We could have, now that I see what sim design can do, we could have given you these scenes.
So, Steph, if we just take a step back, there might be some people in the audience that are not familiar with the entire process.
Terms. Yeah.
So let's say from the beginning, maybe like reading the script to the sequence or the scene is in the game, it's in the box, and you can move on. Could you describe from point A to final result? What is your responsibility and describing the production pipeline?
Okay, so I do mostly the interactive cinematics. So if we know it's a full-fledged cinematic, it's going to go to somebody else. I sit down with the quest designers. We work with regions. Each region had territories. They had a story arc to go with their quest. We would sit down with them. They had a budget of how many scenes they were allowed to have. They had different levels of complexity, and they had to make sure it fit. At first, they would pitch us the ideas. We need this, we need that. We'd say, okay, that's not doable in sim design. You'd be better off with a cinematic for this, or we'd find solution. What I really like is when some people pitch you an idea like, this is what we want. And like this, it would be a cinematic, but what's the essence of what they want? And then you pitch back an idea saying, would that work for you? This is something we can do. And they say, yeah, that works for us. Okay, so we can keep it sim design. So we do that. Afterwards, we go through the script block process where they write the scenes. A bunch of directors sit together. We don't sit together anymore because COVID and all. And we had so much stuff. Like I said, 17 hours of just scene design content. We would all read the script first and then reconvene, make our comments. Comments I would often say, like if somebody has like 4 lines back to back, it's boring. Like you feel it's like a one-person show. It's which is like me talking right now.
This is exhilarating. That's the only difference.
I'm just curious, Steph. I imagine that for 17 hours there was no storyboard process involved for those.
We did some teeny storyboards for some of the when you kill people. I call them the kill rooms. And you're in that dark place because they were fancier and we got a bit more artsy on those. But no, that's the thing. For 17 hours, we had a team of scene design. They're like Swiss knives. They have to be able to do their cameras. They have to have a knowledge of animation, staging, and everything. So we have a lot of people on the team with different backgrounds, and they review each other's scenes. They give feedback. Some people are better with cameras, some are better with animation. And they give each other feedback and they kind of grow and learn from each other.
Yeah. And I'm just curious, for the animation, is it a library or a procedural animation that is used?
It's a library. We went to the mocap studio. We busted the mocap record for one day of shooting with all the idols. We were doing gestures. We have a bunch of idols. And for each of that's more like an attitude, a position that the players keep. And for each of these idols, we have gestures that we can add on top of them. We have transition from one idol to another. That's also something. So that's why my when I said I would have liked to do gameplay animation, I kind of get to do it here.
You kind of do, yeah.
So it's fun.
Interesting. So that seems like a daunting task. So basically the process is you sit down with a bunch of other stakeholders and look at like the game script, pretty much all the narrative like content, and you do some sort of triage. You say, okay, so all these little beats, there's a lot of these little narrative beats. What ingredient are they? You need to discuss as a group. How would it be best displayed in the game? Like you said, if it's super emotional and very complex, it probably needs to go to cinematics. It's an actual cutscene. That way the game has the ability to control essentially everything, from the camera to like all of the content. It's very specific. Where you live in this more sort of procedural world where you're trying to tell something in a way that's
I'm not going to say procedural.
Yeah,
it's not. It's a bank of existing animation, because procedural is really systemic, and that's something different.
Yeah, no, okay. So I'll change the word procedural and I'll use the word real time. Basically, the idea is that it's not a pre-authored sequence that's only like set to play a very specific way. It's like there's more malleability, like that's the tricky part. It's what you're saying. There's almost like if there's branching dialogue or other kinds of things, it's like things aren't necessarily always good. It's interactive, like the way you said earlier. It's not going to be only played in one way, right? So, and are there other ingredients though that could be considered in this little triaging sort of party that you do?
Or
are those the two main ones?
Emotion, the importance of the scene also. Like you want to front load your cinematic usually at the beginning of the game and have some towards the end.
Right. And spacing it out so it's not just too cutscene heavy. You want to space it. Yeah. Okay. Makes sense.
You try to have a recipe, like maybe at the end of every big story arc, you get your big cinematic as a reward. Like we did some pretty big scenes with the dialogue editor that didn't even have any interactivity, and I'm pretty happy with how far we were able to bring them.
Steph, I'm curious, what about lip sync? That's not procedural either?
That's the only procedural part.
Okay, because I was like 17 hours of lip sync by hand.
No. That's the part that's procedural, and that's the one where I have to like to my instincts of what I did before, but we're still trying to improve it. But it's procedural, and I say, like, you know what? If the top of the face is interesting enough, maybe people won't notice when the the
So for the top of the face, is that a library of emotion that you just slide in with procedural lip sync and library of motion for the body?
We have a library of expressions, and we've added also what we call facial punctuation. So if we just want to have a little eye dart, not eye dart, but eyebrows going up, a little squint, something that's really fast, a blink, just blinking. That's so many reviews on like, oh, the head's turning, please put a blink. So many comments just saying that.
Oh yeah.
Because these 17 hours, it's 17 hours, but I had to review all of them about.
That's crazy.
A minimum of 8 times each scene.
Yeah.
So.
And what about the integration in the engine? Is that the same Swiss knife team that is in charge of that as well? So set up the scene, animation, camera, and integration.
The scene designer does the camera. Well, I did like half of what we do. Once we finish the script block, it goes to the scene designers. They set up the scene in the engine straight away. They get the characters, they do their blocking, their staging, their cameras. That's our first pass. We look at him like, okay, do I understand what's the point of this scene? Yes, we do. We don't put any acting at this point because we have robot voices. And it's so surprising what the actors might do. You might see a scene one way, and then the actor will like change it when they deliver the performance. So I don't want people wasting too much time on giving too much attitude to a character while we're just blocking things around. And then when we get to second pass, now we have the final audio, and that's really inspiring to get really a performance. Now it's making sure that the blocks we pick of animations support the audio that we hear.
As best you can, because I mean it's a library after all, right? Do you find yourself adding
it's
to
a
that
big
library?
Yeah,
I would imagine it's gotten quite big by now. Do you ever find yourself being like, oh, but this is too important, we just don't have a good fit, can we go shoot something else? Do you ever find yourself which is why the library keeps getting bigger, I guess, naturally.
Well, we left some room for that.
What's the, like, I mean, I can imagine the tricky part of this big library and applying it to this singular performance. The trick is going to be knowing what's in it. So like, I think, how, like, are you, and maybe you're not allowed to talk about this if it's too proprietary, but I'm curious what the workflow looks like so that you can sort of leverage this library, because otherwise I can have a million animations in a drive somewhere, but like, unless I can see them somehow and oh, that's a good fit. Like, how does that process? What does that look like?
At first, it was just the names of the gestures. So like that was one of the first things we said, like, okay, we need a previewer to see what the gesture looks like. I know we're still working on that previewer. People are like, oh, it's so laggy, but I like to tell those people there wasn't a previewer before. So.
Back in my day.
Yeah, but it goes really fast. And at some point, I even told people, you know, if you don't know what to do during your lunch break, just go through the bank and kind of get to know them.
Because you have to create yourself a mental Rolodex of. I imagine that those cine designers, after a couple of months, a couple of years, are like, oh, yeah, I remember this one. Oh, yeah. Barely.
Sometimes I see in the chats that we have team channels, and I have a scene designer saying, okay, I need something like a waving type of gesture. But it's for this idol. Anybody has an idea, and like, oh, you could use this one, and they kind of have their favorites. So, but
those
memory.
Was it? Did you shot those with actors, or it's animators in a suit that just went crazy for a day?
We have the whole bank that they shot for Odyssey, and we added to that the bank that we shot for Valhalla.
Oh, nice.
For Odyssey, you had all these Greek people talking like this, philosophically, and then we added our big brutes for Valhalla, lots of throne and drinking.
That's not fair. I'm sure there were some very sophisticated Vikings back in the day. I'm sure there were at least a couple.
Oh yeah,
seems a little
we use
unfair
them
to
still.
paint them all with the same brush.
So that's why we keep the whole thing.
Clearly, that's funny.
So Steph, you mentioned something, and it's funny because whatever tools we have, like literally 2 weeks after, we'll be unsatisfied with those tools and we'll want the new shiny thing. How did you, because you've been there for a while, how have you seen this entire process evolve over time? Because even if in the beginning you were not, it's been at least 10 years that you've been more involved with the cinematic. So are there some trends, some important either tools or workflow or things that you're like, oh, we used to do it this way, but we realized that doesn't make sense and we changed, or workflow?
Every change seems really organic at the time and felt like this is where we were. Like the first cinematics that I did were fully keyframed. There was no mocap. Like I said, I started working more with mocap once I switched to AC3 in game. One of the big things that the big new technology we had back then was mocam. Brett might remember mocam.
Oh yeah,
nope.
Definitely.
Okay, a software to do lip sync through machine learning. I was like, yeah, sure. I'm not too sure, but it was really cool once you learn how to use it. I was like, okay, but the machine doesn't learn the same way animators do, so we had to change the rigs. Some of our reflexes as animator to work with that software were completely wrong. It would actually screw up the data. So we had to rethink how we would set up, tell the machine how to learn to animate lip sync to get good. And we still use mocap for the cinematics. They still use it to be able to, and it's not just lip sync, it's also facial performance to capture that. After that, I'd say the big step would be the scene design. That's the big step. So the next one, I'm not sure what it is.
Scene design is not new. I think it's got a new
to
face.
Ubisoft, it's new.
Yeah, but I mean, they've tried to do it before. I think what's interesting now is it seems to be that you found a good recipe, so that's why you're seeing 17 hours being done, because A, more efficient, and B, they don't look like really terrible, like broken Frankensteins. But because I remember, this is something that games have tried. They've been trying to do it for a really long time, and they often look kind of like these discombobulated characters that are trying to try to sort of simulate their talking, or they just look like really simply keep it safe, and it's just talking heads, but that's not really interesting. So have you seen did you work on a game before these games where you had to use a different set of tools and it didn't work out as well?
We tried to do it on Origins,
okay,
and it didn't work as well.
What was missing?
The quality.
Okay,
it looked too bad.
Right.
It's not it's not in the game right now. We changed our mind halfway through. No, we can't do that. Actually, I kind of mea culpa on this one. We were looking at it, and I play a lot of MMOs where the quality of scene, it's often lower than what people are used to in action RPGs,
True story.
Assassins. So when they tried to do a system like that, where we had these kind of automated scenes that were quick, and the camera was cutting between them, I'm like, yeah, sure, I see that all the time. And then some animation directors and artistic directors were like, no, we can't go that close. I'm like, but I see that all the time, but we don't see that all the time in our games.
In that context,
so that was a big learning on my part. I'm like, okay, it's not because it's done somewhere else and that you're fine with it. You have to fit with what works in your game.
So on the topic of specificity, though, I'm just wondering, what specific change then? What was the big aha moment that allowed you to the systems to become to a point where they are now capable in your mind to be able to stand next to these cutscenes in a game like Assassins? What was the main thing? Was it a workflow thing? Was it just shooting better data? Was it both of those things combined?
The tool that they created in Quebec,
okay.
the dialogue editor was freaking awesome. They were working while we were working on on Origins, and I was seeing what they were doing, and I was like, this is what we need. This is what we needed if we wanted to do these systemic scenes that you wanted in game. But it was too late, and we were shipping before them. It wouldn't have been ready in time. The tool that they created is freaking awesome.
Awesome. I assume it's timeline based, probably, right?
Yeah, it's a sequencer. They got their inspiration from a CD Red project. They look at Massive.
Okay.
They really did their homework on this
Nice.
one. And when we saw that, and I know the intention was to have more like fully, not fully, but the generated stuff. That was the intention at first.
Right.
But then you realize, well, there are limits to auto generation.
Totally.
And I don't know.
Which is why you wanted to stay away from the word procedural, because it's certainly not that. Yeah. These are performances that you're stitching together, essentially.
Being opinionated.
Yeah.
When I took the mandate on Valhalla, I was like, okay, give me some design, but do it by my rules. And I said, I don't want to hit the auto generate button. And we do it sometimes, but just to get our cameras in the right spot. But like everybody, I said, I want everybody to place a gesture. If a gesture is somewhere, it's because you thought about it, and there's a reason behind that. So for every turn of the head, for every almost blink gesture that you see in Valhalla right now, somebody really thought, I'm like, okay, I'm really going to put this one. I choose this one over this one, and I'm going to shirt the time, the apex of that gesture, so it's right on the word. So that's the approach that we took.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's more the use of the tool than becoming familiar with it.
It's how you use it also.
Yeah.
It's exactly the tool and how you decide to use it.
Yeah. I'd like to shift gear a little bit. There's something, especially in, games are notorious for crunch time. And that's something, even, of course, Brent and I went through it, but I'm just curious how, and when we say crunch time, it can be like crazy hours, which might lead to exhaustion and sometime to burnout and all that. How did you manage on your side? Do you feel that, the production team at Ubisoft were very reasonable, so there was a very minimal overtime, or have you been doing a lot of overtime yourself but manage it in a way that was never a problem? What your thoughts about it in general?
I'd say in the early days I did a lot of crunch time, but that was, I'd say, at the bottom of the l'échelle.
Bottom of the ladder.
Bottom of the ladder. Merci. So, and I had to prove myself, so I was always doing that extra work. I'd say, I think, tell me if I'm wrong, some of my scene designers are watching right now, so they'll tell you if I'm lying. But the scene design team didn't have to crunch too much on the latest project, and I really tried to make it so, like, when I gave feedback, I always tried to think, okay, that person has this amount of time to do the shot, and the game's gonna ship no matter what. Like, it's rarely scene design that could say, oh, by the way, we're not pretty enough, so you can't ship. I know I have no leverage there, so I want to make sure that everybody's happy and that we reach a benchmark level. So I took the approach of, like, I'm going to do the crunch time and I don't want the team to do the crunch time. I did it this time around, but now I have assistance for the next project because I can't do that again. I was like, okay.
No point on previous production that you felt like, okay, I really need a big break after this production because now I'm just tired and that's affecting my motivation, inspiration, and so on.
We always need a break after projects, but like I said, the crunch time wasn't too crazy on Valhalla. We did some crunch time on previous project, and every time I take a position, it's because I want to make sure things are efficient. So I don't want crunch time, and people find me annoying sometimes. Like, I just want to make things on time and be efficient. Like, okay, like, passion can go so far. So let's keep our team happy. Yay,
a video bomb.
Yeah, that's. I mean, I think that every good director in a creative position needs to have a little bit of a producer's hat to kind of understand, okay, where are we at with the budget, with the deadline, how to not, kill people of overworking them and all, and always keep the context of, okay, let's be realistic with those. Yes, we want to push quality. Yes, we are very passionate about what we're doing, but there's some a reality of production that needs to be taken into consideration. So it seems that you very much have this right brain, left brain kind of production on one side and quality and technical aspect on the other side. So that's great to hear.
I've worked with some directors that don't care about deadlines. They just work. They just think about quality. They said, Steph, my job is quality. I was like,
I've heard that before as well. And I was like, yeah, but if you're in charge of quality, you need to understand deadline and numbers, because otherwise you're going to make irrational requests. And when the times come to make important requests, we won't have time anymore. So
it's like directors that are, I always end up rolling my eye at directors that are like seeming like they even say it out loud that like, you know what, I don't care about the process.
They're proud of it.
It's but it's like, but you realize that like, just because you want these things doesn't mean that they're going to happen. You could, if you drive full blast in the direction you're going there and you don't care about what it's going to cost, the whole engine's going to fall apart and then you're going to have nothing. And that's the thing I never really understood about some directors that are, like you said, they're kind of on this other tier and they don't get their hands dirty and they don't really care about how the sausage is going to get made. But yeah, it's, I think it's a good balance to kind of always have that. I think I would imagine being a grunt in the industry for a while, this of course is something that give you that perspective, right? I would imagine, Steph, like, what it's like to get dumped on, what it's like to clean up these big messes. And so obviously you're trying to protect your team from the same kind of disaster.
I think it's like going through that ladder, like every time I'd see, oh, there's a huge problem here. I think I have a solution. And then I would kind of rise to the challenge to try to fix it. But every time you're put in that position to fix that problem, you often realize it's a bigger problem than you thought. And there's more factors, or like, okay.
For sure. Oh, that's why it's like this. Okay. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Every one of those, every rung of the ladder.
But it's still an issue. So it doesn't mean that because it's a bigger issue that you shouldn't fix it. So because you often feel like, oh, if I be there instead of these directors, these producers, this is what I do, this is what I do. And like,
not so easy.
They've got other pressure coming from the other side. So
yeah, no, that's a very good point. That is something you always have to keep in mind. I think no matter where you are in a production or where you are on the ladder, for instance, you need to everyone's going through something, right? Everyone's dealing with something, some fire, probably multiple fires. They're ones that you don't know, or because they magically get put out without you even knowing that they even existed. So it's not until you're in their shoes. I think the key is, of course, I think it's like you said, it's like keeping your eye on the prize and remembering that these are real fires, and try to at least build some things into the workflow and the process that could be a bit more preventative when possible. Because just because you stepped out of that fire doesn't mean that there aren't people still burning in it. So it's kind of nice to try to make sure that there's some fire exits installed in all of the hallways.
Steph, I'm curious, how did working from home affected you, especially in the beginning, and how did you adjust it? Because I mean, I definitely, when you're in a position that there's a lot of people that rely on you, and you have a team, and you need to communicate, and you need to that's something that must have been challenging at first. How did you went through it? Actually,
it was helpful. It was really helpful because when the pandemic hit, we were like closing Valhalla. We were just doing reviews. So I would open the scenes, look at them, and it takes you like 15 minutes to review, or 30 minutes to. I was at the point at Ubisoft where I was booking a meeting room. We had these teeny meeting rooms where I could like be in a cubicle and not be bothered for like a day or two to be able to do all my reviews, because that's the thing. I wanted to make sure I gave feedback in time so people could do the corrections. And like, if I want something to be done, I need to give it in time. So working from home actually really helped, because I was very comfy, and I shipped the game by working like afternoons and nights, because in the morning I was playing with my daughter. But it helped me keep focused. I guess I didn't see the first part of the confinement because I was like super focused on shipping. I saw it more afterwards when we started talking about new projects and when more brainstorming is involved. That's where it's a bit trickier. That's where I'd like to be sitting down with people and bounce off ideas. But in production, working from home is freaking awesome.
Yeah. What would be the best case scenario for you moving forward? And we are in a future that COVID isn't there anymore, and most Ubisoft, like most studio, will provide a flexible. What would be the best structure you think?
Hybrid. I'd say when we start a production, then we spend maybe more time together at the studio to bounce off ideas and things like that, to get to know the team as well. Because that's the nice part. I'd say we did most of the beginning together, and then we just finished it from home. So we already knew each other. It's a bit more difficult when you start a project and some people join in and like you've never seen them. Having proximity. We went to meet the Sophia team before the project, and just that live interaction with them, you build a connection. So I would keep that. I should have gone to see the Singapore team. That's on my to-do list when I can.
Oh, it would be so terrible having to fly all the way there too.
But once we're in production, maybe like I would be at the studio once a week, twice a week, like to get a few things done. But if I have to do that many reviews, it's great to be from home. You need quiet, and I was much more productive.
Yeah. And how did you manage doing all this from home with a 4-year-old daughter as well? That must have been at home as well, at least for some period of time, because I've been myself in reviews with directors or clients, and just with kids running around and like, oh my God, poor parents, how do they manage to? There's a certain age that you're like, oh my God, that must have been a big challenge.
We had a system, and we kind of were lucky because my boyfriend was working at Google at the time, and Google was the place to work during a pandemic and confinement. It was like, oh, you need to work half weeks, fine, we'll pay you the full week and things like that. So he would take care of our daughter in the morning, and I would even like she would sleep at the time. She would have a nap time. I would nap with her. So this way I'd be able to work afternoons and evenings. He would like put her to bed and everything, but from, I don't know, she would wake up at 3? From 3 to midnight or 1, that was shipping time for me.
Yeah. Do you feel that overall you had more time with her than if there was no pandemic and you had to go every day in and out at the studio?
I try to remind myself that like I'm so lucky to have spent time with my kid because of the pandemic, but now I've been with her for a month now, and I wish there was school today.
Yeah, there's no shame in that. There's no shame in that. I think being honest with yourself is really important, because man, oh man, I agree. It's like such a balance. It's like, it's bittersweet, right? It's like this beautiful time that you normally would have totally lost out on, but like, small doses, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'd say it's the lack of personal time. I wanted her to have a good time. I needed to do my job. Nothing left for mommy.
Yeah, like I feel like the difference is it's not even necessarily about more or less time. I feel like it's different because it's like you get to see them during the day, as opposed to after you working a whole day, being exhausted, coming home, and right before bed, they're grumpy, you're grumpy, and it's like, is that quality time? No, but time like at lunch, hanging out when they're at their highest spirits, and hopefully you have some energy. This is definitely way more valuable than what most parents have had to deal with for years and years and years before this. So it's interesting.
A bit of really cool stuff during the pandemic. We did a full scale, a live scale snakes and ladders.
Oh, nice.
With tiles in the room.
Cool.
And my boyfriend said that's actually good game design we're doing.
Future game designer, look out. Yeah, and it's so many forts. There have been so many forts over this pandemic, like the number of forts. And I keep seeing like parents taking pictures of their like kids' forts that have just come. I think Gailek had put one just recently, and it was just epic. It was like an entire room. It was awesome. So yeah, shout out to all the kids out there. Good job, fort makers.
They're making forts outside now.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Oh yeah, perfect day today with the snowstorm.
Yeah, we got dumped on over here.
Another big announcement, Steph, from Ubisoft in the past few weeks, or maybe it's a little bit more than that, is the 6 weeks vacation policy. Can you? And that seems to be. And okay, thank you. But that seems to be I mean, there's Eidos Montreal that started to say, okay, 4 days a week. Then we have Ubisoft that kind of doubled on in a different way with more paid vacation. And it seems that studio and the industry in general is kind of trying to adjust to the newer reality. Do you have any inside information of what led to provide 6 weeks of vacation? Because that's really generous for.
Well, they can't find people, right? There's a huge problem with recruiting right now.
Yeah.
So they need to
do something.
It's crazy compared to when we started in the industry, where like all the studio were closing, and it was like you have to be the best and dog eat dog almost type of thing to get a job. Now it feels more like if you have somebody in an interview, it feels more like I'm being interviewed. Yeah. It's more like, okay, so True. What do you have for me?
Yeah.
I was like, this is, and it's, I can see a clash maybe of culture. For some people will be like, okay, you need to be all you can be, and like you have to impress and things like that. And then you have people going like, yeah, but what if I don't want to be here in 1 year? Like people are actually saying that in interviews right now. It's surprising, but it throws you off. But that's something I never would have said in any of my interviews. Like, I would have felt bad. So there's a shift going on. So we need to adjust.
Yeah.
And,
I don't know if it's the French culture of Ubisoft or if it's because it's in Montreal. But most studio, we would imagine that you have a difficulty to hire more people. Just provide higher salaries.
Yeah.
So the paid vacation is kind of the same
salaries,
thing,
by the way.
Okay, on top of that, so it's
they raise the salaries.
We raise the salary. We give more. Please come. We have a lot of games to do.
And they got a really cool policy now for a parental leave.
What is it?
I don't want to say it wrong, but like it might be wrong. So disclaimer, because I'm already a mom and I'm not going to be a mom again. So this one doesn't apply to me, but for future parents. It's something like when you go on parental leave, the government will give you 70% of your salary, but up to a certain salary.
Oh, yeah.
So you're kind of blocked. But now Ubisoft will give you 70%. It's going to cover.
They'll cap.
I think that's the one.
That sounds about right. There's a bunch of other studios who do the same thing. So that sounds probably on the money, which is awesome because I mean, most companies don't do that. They don't top you up like that. But that's awesome.
And it's a good incentive also for guys to take their parental leave.
Yeah, that's what a lot of
sometimes when you do the top salary in the couple, you're like, well, I better keep working because we're just going to have 70% and plus of a maximum salary. So now I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, we're super lucky in Canada, I would say in general to have those.
Yeah, all the Americans right now are just like, I hate you so much.
we're losing all of them rapidly. They're just disappeared. Brent, time is flying, and I see a lot of questions in the
we have
chat.
A ton of questions piling up.
I can come back. It was fun.
Yeah,
so.
we might just have to do that, but don't ever. I always warn our guests not to say it because as soon as you say that, it's like my hooks are sent out. I've already emailed you. Check your inbox. Just kidding. So let's see here. Scanning, looking for one. Here's one by our one and only Daryl Purdy. Is each character performance created by hand by an artist? I think this kind of got covered because you're talking about the sequencer and how like you're choosing the different things from the library. So I think
I'd like to say it handcrafted.
Yeah,
we pick blocks and put them together, but there's no auto generation.
Right,
Valhalla.
like someone needs to populate that timeline by carefully choosing the right clips and the right postures, the right transitions, and the right gestures. Okay.
It might be different for other studios, but that's how we did it for Valhalla.
Here's one. This is from Scott. Where do you fit in time to play games? It's a very good question. I think it's when you said you play online games. He was probably like, online games are like notoriously time sinks. So how does she do that? Being a mom and being so obviously busy.
I play Final Fantasy Online 14. It's
is that what you're doing now? It's your go-to?
My little muggle. It's there in the back. It's my go-to, and it's very time-consuming. So I can't say I played that many games. I tend to see reviews on YouTube and things like that. But I stopped playing before we went through the shipping of Valhalla, and I just started again. I think like maybe 4 months ago.
Oh, you got back up on the horse. I used to be a big Guild Wars fan, if I remember correctly. Used to play a lot of Guild Wars.
No, I like Guild Wars, but it was between Final Fantasies and other.
Oh, okay. I see.
It was like your rebound game. But like, it's a rebound game, exactly.
We had a lot of those in World War, in especially in online games. There's been a lot of those in the history of people have been played like EverQuest back in the day. There was always a game that would come out that would sort of bridge between the next really big one. It's so funny. I think Dark Age of Camelot is coming in my brain right now. I would. Yeah, there you go. So quick topic, a little add-on to this question. How important is it to make sure you find time? I mean, you work in the game industry, right? And so like a lot of people talk about how like it's important that you stay connected to the actual culture of games. Like in your mind, is it like important to try to find time to celebrate games, or do you feel like maybe you just played enough in your life and it's not as important?
I think it's important. Do I have time to do it? I gotta pick my priorities to some extent. I think I have a young kid, so I'm gonna blame it on that. Plus shipping, the whole thing. But if we get downtime, and I'm the kind of person that doesn't get that much downtime. I don't like not having stuff to do. Right now, I felt I wasn't doing enough at Ubisoft, so I said like, "Hey, do you need help on this project?" It's like, "Yeah, sure, come on." So there goes my downtime.
So Steph, you've never been in Interprojet?
Nope, I've never been in Interprojet.
Never the sad room, huh? Oh man.
No.
Here's
they
another
always
one.
like suck me in a project.
That's it. That some people are always like getting sucked in. Oh man, I hate it when we don't have enough space. Let me read it first. I'll put it back. Here's a question from Adrian B. You mentioned that being opinionated, I'm using air quotes, just like you did, helped you get put into a leadership role. Do you think that it's possible to lead a team where you do you think it's possible to lead a team where you offer suggestions rather than telling people exactly what to do most of the time? Or do you think it's very important that you say, do it this way? Like, I guess, where are you in the spectrum on that sort of director style?
I'm opinionated, but I try to not tell people like, do this exactly. I try to say, this is the issue I'm seeing. This could be a way to fix it. If you have a better way of doing, I'm all for it. If it's an easy fix, sometimes I say, try this, try that. But I always try to say why I'm giving a solution. So people understand what's my thought process. And then I don't have to make that comment again. And when I say opinionated, it was more the reverse when I had to deal with directors. And I was like, no, I really think this could work better. So now that I'm a director, I work the other way around because I know there's a bunch of opinionated people under me as well that might have really great ideas. So it's doing the balance. And sometimes people have super awesome ideas, but they don't work with the whole game. Like they would stand out too much. Like, I really wish we could do it. I you know what? I'm going to tell you, the scene would look kind of better like that, but it wouldn't look like an Assassin's Valhalla scene. So that's where you have like to make tough calls. Like, okay, what can we keep from that? We tried to find a common ground and say, okay, now it works with the game. And we found out there's a bunch. That's what I like about scene design. We have to go so fast and we don't do storyboards or things like that. I pitch a few ideas sometimes for big scenes, and some I don't give ideas at all. And they come up with something. And that's something I had to learn quickly, that it's not because it's not what I had in mind that it doesn't work. I have to assess first if it works. Then I give feedback. If it doesn't work, then I can say like, okay, you could try this or that and do a few suggestions, but it's not because it's not my idea that it doesn't work.
Yeah. I really like this question and how you answered it, because there's this misconception that often being opinionated and micromanaging is the same thing, and they are two completely different things. When you're opinionated, it means that first you're creative, because you can have new ideas, and you have confidence to express those ideas with whoever is around you. As micromanagement is more like telling people exactly what to do. You can micromanage even if you don't have a strong opinion, or just as you described, you can have a lot of ideas and being very vocal, but you're not going to tell people exactly how to do it. You're more going to create a sandbox of, okay, here's why it makes sense, and then who has the best solution to come for it.
Yeah, that's an important distinction. I think the idea of you being opinionated is one thing, but then how you actually like choose to mechanically act on those opinions is that's the magic, right? Is like, can you still be collaborative and like offer your opinion, but then talk your way through some sort of meeting of the minds and find some sort of middle ground. Is, I think, so in other words, what you need to get out of this chat is for sure to make sure you don't not speak your mind, but you need to also listen. And so there needs to be that balance. I think Steph put it nicely when she said she's looking for that balance in the middle. Like there's a time and a place for both. Sometimes directors have to be like, it has to go this way. But whenever possible, they need to leave themselves open-minded and open-eared to act on a really good idea that might be floating around. Let's see here. I mean, I think I remember a creative director once said that their secret to success was their main skill was knowing a good idea when they heard one, and then finding a way of championing it, regardless of whether it was their idea. They have to be a merchant of good ideas, where they can manufacture them, they can find them, whatever they need to do, because a game needs to be full of good ideas, no matter what. Doesn't matter where they come from. This is a good one to ask. This gets covered a lot on this show, but I think it's always nice to get the guest's perspective on this, because this is sort of this common thing that sort of floats around in people's minds, this self-doubt, this imposter syndrome, these kind of things. Like, from your mind, Steph, have you dealt with these kind of feelings in the past? And we're like, what sort of tools have you used to sort of push through them? This idea of, earlier obviously is, will I ever be good enough? But sometimes people in the job are wondering if they're good enough, and they question their ability. What have you, what kind of perspective do you have on this?
I don't think it goes away, unfortunately. That imposter syndrome.
Bad news.
I think I have the book. It's Omar that made us read this.
Oh, let me see.
Art and Fear.
Oh yeah, it's a good one. Yep.
And this one, I think there's an apprentice that asks the master, like, when do you know like that you're good enough? And then the master says like, when I know that I'll never be good enough, or something like that.
Yeah.
So like you kind of find your flaws and try to assess them. Like my blocking, that I didn't know what it was. I didn't know the art behind animation. I took animation mentor. I still feel like a fraud sometimes when I'm overlooking all these cutscenes and saying, okay, maybe your camera here is not good. Like, I'm not a camera expert. I'm a person that put a lot of keyframes for a lot of time, but I have a certain sensibility to that, and I was learning in the process. So other directors came to help, and they were giving feedback, and I would like notice, they tend to say that a lot. So I added that information to my repertoire and started giving feedback on this. We're always learning, unfortunately, and it's something I had trouble with as well. Like, once I do animation mentor, now I'll know how things work. It's kind of like a Tylenol. Right? It helps for a while, and then you kind of hit another plateau, and like, oh no, there's more, and there's more, and there's more.
Quick, we got to call Animation Mentor and tell them we have a new slogan for them. Animation Mentor, it's like that, like a Tylenol.
I Animate would have worked as well, but didn't exist back then.
Right.
It's I think as any professional artist, you have to accept that you will be vulnerable in the workplace. You will not always be good. You will have to learn. It is what it is. And as you said, Steph, you're one thing away of being great, and then you get there and like, oh shit, now there's another one, and another one, and another one.
Yeah.
And if you keep your ego off the door, and just are fine with being vulnerable and open to others, and learn that's how you're going to grow rapidly.
Yeah.
If you're like, oh no, you kind of pretend and you don't want to share and don't want to look bad and all that, you're going to stagnate pretty rapidly.
100%.
I'd say if you can keep passionate about what you're doing, then you can like brush off that imposter syndrome to some extent. Like, hey, I'm still learning. It's fine because I left this and I'm going to grow more. I guess if I was stuck in something I didn't like as much, then the imposter syndrome would creep much more into me. I'm like, okay, why am I doing this?
Totally. Yeah, there's a commonality between your answers there that's centered around this concept of growth. I often try to remind people that look, what you're feeling right now is growth, and growth is good. And then I tell them to go back and take a look at some work that they did a few years ago, and then look at it and then feel the shame of how bad it was back then, and then go, hey, okay, but would you rather look at that and feel like it was really great? That would be bad, because that means you haven't grown. So it's always a relative thing. You're always playing this game of catching up with yourself, and so just learn to embrace and enjoy that feeling, because it means that you're going upwards, not sideways or downwards. Okay, we have a big juicy one from Veronica I'm going to put up here. I don't know if it's going to fit. Let me see. Does it fit? Oh, it does. Good. This is a good one. It's very specific. And I'm wondering if you have any funny anecdotes to sort of throw at us. I'm sure you do after 17 hours of content. I'm sure there was a couple flubs. Question. I've heard that game cinematics can sometimes break hard if something changes in gameplay, engine, console, just some sort of update. What's the biggest something changed and now the cinematics have exploded moment you've had on a project?
I don't know.
Or the one that left the deepest scar.
The deepest scar is the Arnaud in Unity without a face, where you could just see the eyes and the dentures.
Oh, yeah. Good.
It sucks, because like one of the best facial we did, I think,
of course,
it was an advance for its time. I think the facial on Unity, but it was a teensy bit too buggy to see the awesomeness.
And I think that this one was pretty much under the spotlight, because I remember seeing it on YouTube in a compilation.
It went viral.
Yeah. But during a live game, that's the kind of thing that can happen. But as we're doing the production, there's also like the script can change. There can be like a quest arc that's cut, and now your scene doesn't make any sense anymore. We try to be more agile at tackling these problems now, but at first sometimes we would just like cut a whole part of gameplay between two cutscenes, where you'd have a cutscene, then you'd walk for 10 paces, and then you'd have another cutscene. Like, what happened? There used to be a huge mission between these two, and now they're gone. So it felt a bit weird, but they're like, oh.
Yeah, it very much felt like a House of Cards at time. Oh, let me just remove this. Oh shit, all this fell.
Yeah.
Oh, we're just going to put this. Oh no, now it's.
Honestly,
there was an article on Kotaku saying like games are held together with duct tape.
Because they are.
Yeah.
They really quite literally like digital duct tape. I would say like for those who out there for those in chat that are listening to this conversation, or people who listen to this in the future, if you work in games, you know what we're talking about. But if you don't, it is it's quite the spectacle to see when like people come in the morning and there's something terrible has happened. And it's like some random check-in of a completely unrelated, seemingly unrelated thing in a completely different system and on different like something in the interface suddenly removes faces from characters. This happens on literally a regular basis in game dev. So a quick shout out to all the technical artists and all the engineers that work in this industry, because I don't know how you find the many needles and the many haystacks that are constantly popping up left, right, and center. But it really is quite amazing to see people figure it out, these seemingly disconnected things. I don't know how they do it, but it's like that. It's like House of Cards is a perfect way to explain it. Some seemingly small change, the whole thing comes down. It's crazy. Let's see. I'm moving down the list here. Oh, this one's from Christine. Do you feel more flexible with your employees' working hours since this working from home shift? And do you think that it's there to stay post-pandemic? productive in the morning versus night. So I guess basically, what do you think? What are your hopes? And what, like, you know, are you sensing a shifting change that's going to be sticking around for a while, or is it going to be there forever in your mind?
I think the need to have, well, I would keep the need to have core hours where you know that you can reach people. When I said that I worked until 1 a.m. for Valhalla, that was actually good because I was able to talk with the people in Singapore. So I was able to talk with all the teams, and I talked more with Singapore because of that. But I'd say for scene design, like the scene designers, when we have juniors and they're ramping up, it's nicer to be close to them, and they were the ones that came back to work the quickest. Because there's lots of things to learn. But the people that were more senior, they were very happy at home, just doing their thing. And they didn't feel the need to come to work, and I didn't feel the need to ask them to come to work. They were outputting their stuff, and they were able to ask questions to the people they needed. So,
do you think the toothpaste is ever going to get put back in the bottle, though, or is this the new normal? Do you think?
I think
hybrid. I mean, if you're a betting person, you think it should be the new normal.
Hybrid should, but for this, I see a lot of people in the production that they only need to talk to people very few times a day or a week. So why have these people? They should come maybe sometime, just like I said, to meet people, to know we're alive and that we're not a generated or I don't know, deep fake person.
Oh yeah, I'm a hologram right now. I'm not even
exactly. Just I'd say for team building, it would be nice to see the people sometimes, but I think it's more at a higher levels, directors, the people that do a lot of brainstorming. These people are going to have still to meet up more. But at the production level, I think you can do a lot from home.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think it's kind of here.
Plan, actually.
Well, I think the reason why this is still a hot topic is that there are some studios that do not feel that way. And they've been very public about trying to be, no, we're going back to as soon as we can, as soon as the government lets us, we're going to go back to the regular thing. And I don't know. I think it's we've been speculating for a while now. We should have like a scoreboard of like where the bets are and like where it's going, because it feels like it changes every day. But when you have big companies like Ubisoft and IDOS and a lot of these big ones in town that are like, nope, this is like, we're making a statement. This is what we're doing. You know, this is the way it's going to be now moving forward. I think it's interesting to see that all play out.
I think that it's this hybrid approach is going to be vastly adopted by most studios. I think it's a minority that will go 100% remote and 100% on site. What is interesting is how each studio are going to adapt, because one of the things that you mentioned is that, okay, let's still have core hours, because, okay, it's great that some want to work in the evening or on the weekend, but we need at some point to be able to know that this person, even if working from home, is going to be there if we need. So maybe there'll be like, a shorter period of core hours, let's say maybe from 10 to 2 or something like that, or just the afternoon or the morning. And then the rest of the hours will because yes, when you kind of follow your own rhythm, or you're a morning person, or you're an evening person, or you're someone with, no kids that can afford to do a few extra hours on the Sunday to kind of help out. But yeah, it's really how every studio and even some stuff that we discuss. Okay, you do a meeting, you have 8, artists at the studio and 4 at home. How do you deal with that? Because if it's in a meeting room and you have those 8 person that are there live, and then you have a screen at the back with those 4, they're going to be left out. Forget about them. It's almost like they don't exist. So does it mean that everyone, even those on site, are all doing the meeting? They'll be beside each other, but in front of the screen. That's a part that I think is going to be very interesting to see how everyone's studio is adapting. And we're barely starting to see how that's going to happen.
It's funny you mentioned that because I saw exactly that in the summertime when I was actually going into the studio. We were seeing a lot of people would choose to stay at their desks and meet if there was a good number of people that were online, and it felt like the right thing to do. You know what I mean? It's funny because we're just figuring it out as we go. And some studios are embracing it, some studios are pushing back, trying other things. In some cases, people are even trying different technologies. We know there's people spending billions of dollars in the space of how can you make these online moments that be even more interactive. I think that I'm excited to see what happens in that area, because I think that there's obviously a market for it, and we'll see how that plays out too. We're at time, so I would just I don't know how we did that. I felt like we blinked and it
always goes so fast.
Yeah, it's the way it goes. Welcome to the black hole of time, Stephanie. We're happy to have you here. Thank you for taking the time and hanging out with us.
That was super awesome. Fun. Thanks.
Yeah, I will definitely try to make sure we lure you back though to have a continued conversation.
That was great.
Thanks, Steph. That's what we do. Yeah, thanks a lot. I'll see you both around. Cheers.
Bye. All right.
Bye, everybody. Bye, chat. See you later. Actually, I usually do my closing thing. I don't know why I said bye. So that was a lot of fun. It was interesting to see yet another person who started off in animation. And as she said, like it was interesting that she got into Ubisoft doing something very hyper specific, which was facial stuff. And I remember watching and hearing stories from Stephanie in the early days of mocap. Mocap, she threw it out there. It's a proprietary technology that's a lot like faceware. If you know what faceware is, it's essentially like video-based capturing of facial performances, and it's evolved. And as a matter of fact, it's become almost the gold standard in many ways. I know Simon's in chat, and so he knows a lot about that. He specializes in the same thing. I don't know if you caught that, Stephanie, because Stephanie was avoiding chat the entire time because she was trying to not be distracted by all the people that were going to be in there, obviously. So just a quick mention. I know that Stephanie's still backstage. Simon says hi. He was in there excited that you were on the stream today. So yeah, it was interesting to see her come in with such a specific. She says hi back. I'm passing notes in class now. This is perfect. And then it just grew into like, she started off in very cinematic oriented stuff. And then she was very curious naturally about the gameplay. And now she's straddling this interesting kind of like both these worlds. Like this, it's definitely very narrative and very cinematic, but it's also dabbling very much in the real time systems, the same way gameplay does, but serving a different purpose. So it sounds like she's found her niche, and she seems to be having a lot of fun. I would like to very much thank everybody for being here today. We actually had a lot of people in chat, a lot of activity, a lot of questions. We always like that because, I mean, David and I ask ourselves constantly, what are we going to do in the coming, weeks and months and years to make sure that we're answering the question, why should someone show up live? So I think that in my mind, the big thing is in a conversation like this is that I want to make sure that your voices are heard. So, if you have questions or even have thoughts that are, really interesting, maybe we'll even change the format. So it doesn't have to be a Q colon all the time. Maybe sometimes it's just like a thought T colon or something else, or an opinion like we were talking about today that you might want to have, come up. And so we can sort of discuss it. But we are trying to answer that question on a regular basis. So please do try, if you got some thoughts and you got some ideas and you got some questions, please don't be shy. Just throw them in chat, but just don't forget to put, at least for now, the Q colon, because it makes it easier to scan and find and enter it into the conversation. So thanks again for Stephanie. Thanks again for David. Thanks to you, chat. Stick around for the don't actually stick around because it'll be a while, but please do come back to our next conversation. We have actually next week we have Alexis Weneroy, and they are involved, of course, with the very hot topic of Arcane that's happening on Monday the 24th at 3:00 p.m. Eastern Standard. We also have a Q&A tomorrow with David. It is going to be our regular sort of standard Q&A tomorrow because we're going to be skipping one next week, and then we're going to be coming back in February with some new, fresh content for you. So hope to see you then. Take care. Stay animated. See you around.